Okay, let's talk about fire drills. You know the sound, right? That ear-splitting brung that rips through the middle of a quiet classroom or a boring office meeting. It's a sound we've all been conditioned to. We sigh, we roll our eyes. Maybe we grab our jacket if it's cold. We file out in a semi-orderly line, stand around in a parking lot, wait for the all clear. It's routine. It's mundane. It's supposed to be just a drill. But what happens when it's not? What happens when the line between a practice run and a real terrifying event gets blurry? I've been digging, and let me tell you, the stories I found are not your typical, oh, it was just a false alarm kind of thing. These are the stories that stick with you, the ones that make you second-guess that familiar, annoying bell. They start out normal, just like any other day. But then, something shifts. A detail is out of place. A shadow moves where it shouldn't. A head count comes up wrong in a way that will make the hair on your arms stand up. The ordinary becomes, well, you'll see. You might never look at a fire drill the same way again. These aren't just spooky campfire tales. They're real experiences from real people who thought they were just going through the motions. They walked out of their buildings expecting a few minutes of fresh air and a quick return to their desks. Instead, they walked into a mystery that still haunts them. They found something lurking in the manufactured chaos, something that wasn't part of the drill, something that wasn't supposed to be there at all. So, get comfortable. Maybe dim the lights a little, because we're about to pull the alarm on some seriously dark history. Tonight, we're diving into 3 stories that will make you question everything you thought you knew about these so-called safety procedures. Start in an old high school, move to a modern office building. Finally, the last one is a real head-scratcher. Each story is a chilling reminder that sometimes the real danger isn't the fire. It's what you find when you're trying to escape it. Are you ready? Because the first bell is about to ring. And trust me, this is one drill you won't want to miss. Our first story takes us to a high school in rural Ohio. One of those classic brick buildings from the 1950s that always seems to smell faintly of chalk dust and floor polish. It was a crisp autumn afternoon. Mark was a junior, half asleep in his history class. The teacher was droning on about something. The afternoon sun was streaming through the tall, wavy glass windows, making everyone feel even more sluggish. It was just another painfully normal Tuesday. That is, until the fire alarm started blaring, its screech echoing through the ancient hallways. Everyone groaned. It was the 3rd drill that semester.
All right, class. You know the procedure.
Single file, no talking, let's go. The students shuffled out of their seats, grabbing their backpacks out of habit. The hallway was already filling up with teenagers, a sluggish river of bored faces moving toward the nearest exit. Mark fell into line with his friends, joking about how they were going to be late for football practice. Everything was completely, utterly normal. They had no idea what was waiting for them outside. As they filed out onto the sprawling front lawn, the teachers started their usual routine, herding students into designated class groups, pulling out their clipboards for the head count. It was then that Mark noticed something odd. A thin, wispy trail of gray smoke was curling out of a second-story window on the far side of the building. The arts wing. It wasn't thick, billowing smoke like a real fire, but it was definitely there. A few other students pointed it out, murmuring among themselves. "Did they use a smoke machine this time?" someone asked. "That's a little extra for a drill." The teachers seemed just as confused, whispering to each other and glancing nervously at the window.
Okay, everyone, stay calm. We're looking into it.
But Mark wasn't looking at the principal. He was staring at that window. Because for a split second, through the shifting haze of smoke, he saw a figure. It was tall and unnervingly thin, standing perfectly still. It wasn't a teacher or a student. It was just a dark, solid silhouette against the light of the room, like a cutout made of shadow. And then, just as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. Mark blinked, rubbing his eyes. Did he really just see that? He turned to his friend Liam.
"Did you see that in the window?"
Liam just shrugged. His attention focused on a group of girls across the lawn. "See what? The smoke?" "Yeah, it's weird." No one else seemed to have noticed the figure. Mark's heart started pounding a little faster. It was probably just a trick of the light, he told himself. The smoke, the old glass, the angle of the sun. But the image was burned into his mind, a tall, still, featureless shape just watching them. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the all-clear was given. The smoke had vanished. The principal announced it was a minor malfunction with a fog machine in the theater department. Everyone grumbled and started shuffling back inside, the brief moment of excitement already over. But Mark couldn't shake the feeling of unease. As his class re-entered, they were routed through a different hallway to avoid the arts wing. This corridor was older, narrower, rarely used. It was strangely silent, the usual school chatter muffled by the thick walls. As they walked, Mark heard it. Thump, thump, thump. It sounded like slow, heavy footsteps, out of sync with the hundreds of students shuffling back to class. These footsteps were deliberate, measured, coming from just around the corner. Mark slowed his pace, trying to listen more closely. The sound was getting fainter, as if walking away, deeper into the empty part of the school. He stopped, straining to hear over the noise of his classmates. "What's wrong?" his teacher asked, giving him a gentle nudge. "Nothing," Mark mumbled and hurried to catch up. He didn't tell anyone what he'd heard. He didn't tell them about the figure in the window either. He knew it sounded crazy. For the rest of his time at that school, he avoided the arts wing. And sometimes, when the hallways were quiet after the final bell, he could almost hear it again. A slow, solitary footstep, echoing from a place where no one was supposed to be. The school never used a fog machine for a drill again. Years later, during his college reunion, Mark ran into his old history teacher. They were reminiscing about their time at the school. Mark, feeling bold after a couple of drinks, finally decided to ask, "Hey, do you remember that weird fire drill back in junior year? The one with the smoke in the arts wing?" The teacher's smile faded slightly. "Oh, I remember it," he said, his voice a little lower. "That was a strange day." The principal was furious. Turns out the theater department swore they never used their fog machine. It hadn't even been plugged in for months. Mark felt a cold chill snake down his spine. "So, what was the smoke from?" he asked. The teacher just shook his head. No one ever figured it out. The fire department came and did a full sweep. They found nothing. No source of a fire, no faulty wiring, no smoke. The official report just listed it as an unexplained atmospheric anomaly. We were all told not to talk about it, to avoid causing a panic. The teacher paused, looking out over the crowd at the reunion. He seemed to be searching for the right words, a strange look on his face. "But that's not the weirdest part," the teacher continued, his voice barely a whisper. "We did 3 separate head counts while we were outside. Every single time we came up with one extra person. We counted and recounted, but every teacher's roster was correct. All the students were accounted for. Yet the total number was always off by 1. One extra person was standing on that lawn with us, and none of us knew who it was." Mark just stared at him, the memory of the tall, thin silhouette flashing in his mind. The teacher let out a short, nervous laugh. "We just chalked it up to mass confusion, a counting error. What else could we do?" he said, then clapped Mark on the shoulder and walked away to greet another former student, leaving Mark standing alone in the middle of the noisy room. An unexplained smoke, footsteps in an empty hall, a head count that was off by 1. Mark never got his answer. He just had the chilling realization that on that autumn afternoon, they weren't alone on the lawn, and whatever, or whoever that extra one was, had been seen by him, standing in the smoke, watching them all. Now, let's fast forward a couple of decades and move to a sleek, modern office building in downtown Chicago. This story comes from a woman named Chloe, a graphic designer who worked on the 14th floor. Her office was what you'd expect. Open plan, lots of glass minimalist furniture, constant low hum of keyboards and quiet conversations. It was sterile, professional, and the furthest thing from a haunted old school you could imagine. The fire alarms were tested on the first Wednesday of every month, like clockwork. They were an inconvenience, but a predictable one. This particular Wednesday started like any other. Chloe was deep in a project, headphones on, trying to meet a deadline. When the alarm went off at exactly 10 o'clock, she sighed, saved her work, and grabbed her phone. Everyone on her floor began the familiar, leisurely stroll to the stairwell. No real urgency. It was just a drill. Emergency lights flickered, casting a sterile, pulsing glow as they joined the slow exodus down 14 flights of stairs. That's when she saw her. A few steps ahead, pressed against the wall to let others pass, was a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old, with long dark hair and 2 braids. Chloe frowned. What was a child doing here? It wasn't take your daughter to work day. The girl wore a simple, old-fashioned blue dress, out of place among business suits. She wasn't crying or scared. She stood silently, head down, as adults flowed around her. Chloe felt a pang of concern. Was she lost? Where were her parents? She tried to get closer, but the crowd was too thick, pushing her forward with its slow, relentless tide. Chloe kept her eyes locked on the little girl, determined not to lose her, a small island of stillness in a moving sea of people. They reached the fourth-floor landing. The girl turned and pushed open the heavy fire door. She slipped through it and disappeared from the stairwell. Chloe's stomach dropped. That was against the rules. You never left the stairwell until the ground floor. What was she thinking?